Kia ora and welcome to Cinema in Context, where we discuss all things film and the connections between. My name is Jeremy Downing.
I'm Sarah Watt.
And I'm William Chan.
And each month at Cinema in Context, we discuss two films, one current and one retrospective, with some connection. It could be the same director, the same actor, or a similar theme. However, over the last month, there has been a bit of a phenomenon, what you would call the Tiger King of this current lockdown in Aotearoa. And that is the limited series by HBO, The White Lotus. It's a 6-episode, exploration of a range of themes that we're going to get to. Please be warned that this episode will have spoilers. So if you haven't seen The White Lotus, I would encourage you to pause this episode and come back to this at a future date. Anyways, I'm going to pass it over to William to give us a bit of an introduction to our focus for this month. Thank you, William.
Thanks, Jeremy. So, introduction. Guys. So, I just watched something starring Alexandra Daddario, where a group of privileged, pretty people with deep-seated parental issues happen upon a luxurious Lotus-themed resort where their troubles ostensibly melt away. But the place is actually a thinning-veiled stand-in for the Lotus Eaters of Greek myth, and our heroes struggle with the onset of apathy in this isolated paradise, obscuring them from the very real underlying issue of class warfare. But enough about Percy Jackson and the Olympians, the lightning thief, boom!
Oh, wow.
Deep
What a
pull,
connection.
Yeah.
Sarah, did you want to fill in the blanks, perhaps, of any additional information that would be helpful to understand?
Oh, wait,
What?
guys.
Oh.
I have something else. Sorry about that. That was just Percy Jackson. Here we go. Okay, guys. I just finished watching a really well-received HBO miniseries starring some big Hollywood names. Set against the backdrop of gorgeous US coastal scenery, it examines the lives of whimsically wealthy white people and how what is presented on the surface can hide a myriad of secrets, insecurities, and betrayals. Meanwhile, the series also delves into the normies that are swept up into this world of crashing waves, designer suites, and disaffected offspring, and how they are often the ones ending up as collateral damage from the, you guessed it, very real underlying issue of class warfare. The first episode features the tantalizing hook of a mysterious murder, the details of which are finally unveiled as accidental, yet strangely karmic in the big finale. With the act of violence committed, our characters are brought closer together as the sounds of the ocean signal a move to a new, uncertain status quo. But enough about Big Little Lies!
Oh,
I was trying to guess that one. I was like, are we talking about Succession? Are we talking about Knives Out? No, that's not HBO. Well done, William. Well, okay. Well, as I say again, Sarah, any other gaps or blanks or information that would be helpful to know?
I hate to be the lawyer in the room, but actually at the beginning, and what you say is so true and brilliant, William, because Big Little Lies, was it Big Little Lies? White Little Lies? Big Little. Something lies.
White Little Lies works.
Right. Well, I mean, heck, that was a heck of a show. And indeed, but, I hate to be the lawyer in the room when I say that technically at the very beginning of The White Lotus, when everybody's favorite rich kid, Shane, is waiting awkwardly in the departure lounge to return home. In fact, they're very clever because they say, I hear that somebody died or someone was killed, but they don't say that someone was murdered. And that was relevant to me simply because I spent 6 episodes thinking, who's going to die? And as we'll discuss, Mike White, who wrote and did he direct it? Actually, no, I think of it, he must have.
He directed all 6 episodes.
Right. So actor, writer, director Mike White did such a terrific job in a very Agatha Christie sort of way of positioning every single character with a motive to commit a killing or to be killed. Absolutely brilliant. Or just to die. I was wondering, is somebody just going to drown wantonly in a swimming pool, or is somebody going to choke on something, or are they going to overdose on whatever, So yeah, White Lotus stick a whole lot of privilege into a space and see what happens.
Let's just, I guess, connect the dots so that our listeners who, I mean, I'm sure they have, but William's alluded to it, and Sarah, you've alluded to it. What a great title. You know, the White Lotus, it's referring to those White Lotus, the Lotus eaters in Greek mythology, those that are consumed with luxury over the practicalities of life. I've got, of course, the white privilege that is all through this series, and then his name as well, our director and
our protagonist. Oh yeah. Mike White, of course.
Mike White. And I just also want to say as well, before we get in earnest into this conversation, we are recording this via virtual recording, dear listeners. So none of us are in the same room as we were last month. While New Zealand continues to be we're all currently in what's called level 4, alert level 4 of lockdown. We have no little pleasures of takeaways and trips to ocean views. Our lives are very hard.
We're basically stuck inside with the people with whom we live, and that won't change until we go down an alert level. Jeremy, can I just jump in though with the old Lotus eater? White Lotus is actually also Chinese slang that means someone who is pure in appearance but the opposite inside. And
oh wow, was that in the series? Did that come up in the series?
No, it came up in my mini research when I wrote a bit of a blog post about my response to the White Lotus. And an accidental Google brought that up. And so if you look at it that way, sure enough, there are people who aren't maybe pure in appearance, but certainly look as though their lives are perfect, right? Or that their lives are great, ostensibly, but the opposite is true inside. So how about that, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Is that, William, from your sort of ethnic experience, is that a story that you're familiar with?
Well, it's an idiom, bailia, a turn of phrase, which literally means White Lotus.
Brilliant. Well, Sarah, do you want to jump us in first? What are some of your initial reactions? Before I say that, what I do want to say is that Sarah was the first one to jump into this series. And as I mentioned, it seems to be the Tiger King of our lockdown, in that just everybody's talking about it and watching it. And then she said, watch this series. I jumped in and it became my obsession. And then the two of us effectively forced William to watch it.
We worked really, really hard on him. There was so much discussion about this isn't a movie. We do cinema. And we had to invoke the fact that several years ago, you guys did a whole episode on Game of Bloody Thrones, didn't you? And that's television. So it's like, well, there's your precedent. So, William, what are you going to say about that?
Quite a bit, actually.
Well, here we are, listeners.
So yes, Sarah, what are your thoughts?
Well, I always think that I am not going to have a very high tolerance for horrible films and television. I always think that I'm not into horror, that I don't like nasty people. I hate exploitation flicks, and yet I love Breaking Bad. I loved Ozark. I adore Succession. So when someone recommended White Lotus but said, "Oh, it's pretty dark," though, there was a moment where I was like, is this really something that I want to be watching when the world is falling apart around my ears? And I thought, well, what the heck? If I don't like it, then I'll stop. And I loved it. And 6 episodes later, it's absolutely, when you say Tiger King, my goodness, absolutely one of the most gripping, brilliantly constructed, incisive. The fact that we've already alluded to the fact that it really is a damning indictment of white privilege. And I absolutely, my world is one of white privilege. That has been my experience. This film, this show gave me so much food for thought and was so provocative. And even though I would consider myself to be on the correct thinking end of a thinking spectrum, it made me reevaluate vacations that I've had, resorts that I've stayed in, a couple of cruises that I've done in my previous life. And it really made me think about issues of going on holiday to places that have been colonized by white people, which is pretty much damn near everywhere in the world, isn't it? And and what that means for me as a white consumer of that vacation experience. So, oh my goodness, not only are we getting incredible dialogue, beautifully drawn characters, and I really commend the fact that actually, I don't think, and maybe we'll discuss this, you guys may beg to differ, but I didn't feel that there was a character I could resoundingly hate or completely love. Everybody was nuanced and layered and flawed as well as smart. And so I just thought, what incredible writing. And my goodness, I'll watch. I mean, 6 episodes wasn't enough. I could have gone for so much more.
Brilliant. William, I'm going to throw it to you. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, sure thing. I thought it was okay. Yeah, I guess I knew some stuff going in. Basically, it was the new zeitgeist this year, especially for one of these HBO miniseries. 6 episodes. Yeah, sure. Why not? We can talk about it for the podcast. I have a lot of goodwill towards the show, but I think a lot of it also just doesn't rub me the right way. And this is how I approach the show. Like, overall, I found it to be, and you may beg to differ, I found it to be extremely didactic. Where everything that the show was saying was worthwhile, but mostly done with the subtlety of like a hammer and anvil. And this is all the way down. It's the acting, it's the dialogue, it's the music. I know I read your blog post, Sarah. I know you really like the music. I thought the music was just overbearing, and it felt really uncomfortable every time the score kicked in.
Do you mean too on the nose? Like, William, what does didactic mean? Does it mean in your face?
It's like in your face, really, really lectury. It's like,
right.
Hey guys, this is what the show is about. You get it yet? You get it now?
Yeah, right.
The thing that it reminded me a lot. I don't know why I'm making this connection. Is the finale of Joker, the Todd Phillips movie, about the Batman villain. And at the end, how Joker is on the talk show, he's talking to Robert De Niro, and the movie stops dead. He was like, Murray, this is what is wrong with the world. And that is the feeling I got watching The White Lotus. Like, there's a lot of good in it, and I like a lot of the acting. I like some of the plot stuff, but I couldn't shake this feeling that it was presented in a way that was so obvious and almost uncomfortably so.
Like, do you think that's a symptom of satire, and that it's having to be quite clear with its intentions, so that because people really struggle to get their head around satire typically, and this is very clearly in that zone, and I guess I didn't mind that so much because
that's a really good point, Jeremy. I guess it was just 1 or 2 bits that like really, really leapt out at me. The end of, I think it was episode 5, where Armand starts quoting the Tennyson poem, and I was like, oh my gosh, guys, you've just made subtext text in the clunkiest way possible. The music, as I say, every time you see the Moss Parker family, it's making animal sounds, and it's like I get it. I get it. TV show. It's like anthropological, and we're talking about like rich people as if this were a wildlife documentary. It just doesn't need to be so unsubtle. Again, this is just personal preferences.
Oh, and that's totally fair enough. But do you think it's because, William, you are already wherever on that spectrum of you already know, you already have done reflection or at least perception, and therefore for you it might not have been quite as illuminating, if you will. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's also a good point. Maybe this is going to sound awful, and I'm sorry, dear listener, if I come off as just a dick, but it's because I am cinematically literate.
Yes.
It's like, I remember in the second episode, and I think this is where it really started creeping up on me, this feeling. The episode begins, and I think, who is it? It's the Timothy Zahn character, right? He's like lying in bed and remembering
Steve
what
Zahn.
his uncle. Sorry, Timothy Zahn is the author of a bunch of Star Wars novels. Yes, Steve Zahn is lying in bed and thinking about what his uncle told him. This is a big revelation about his dad.
Yes, yes.
And it just replayed dialogue from the last episode. And it's like, I'm not dumb. I remember this.
Sure.
Just lots of little things like this, which I felt the show. Maybe it didn't have the confidence in its audience to remember little or relatively small things like that, but it just felt compounding, and it just kept happening again and again and again. So that's what kind of colored my viewing of the whole series.
I appreciate that, William. I mean, I personally, I was all right there for the ride. I really, really enjoyed the beats and the tonal shifts and the way that it was playing with the different commentaries and character work and truths and mistruths. I felt that for me, everything was quite like it felt earned and balanced. And I just want to bring up there's two characters that spring to mind. So in regards to Sarah's comment about nobody being wholly likable or wholly evil, I thought her name's Brittany O'Grady, who played Paula, the friend who came along with the family. Was it the Mossbacher family?
Yes.
I don't remember. And just how, just some of the situations she has to sit through is very awkward. But then she's the fact that she's so woke, but then she kind of, discards that young guy that she had to fling with, who ultimately was one of the collateral damage that you mentioned, William, at the start. I thought that was a really wise choice on the writer's behalf to not make her the kind of, because up until that point she was clearly like that, she's the perfect one, or she's the one that we should
or the
see
victim,
as being,
perhaps.
the victim.
Sure.
But it was problematic because of her and her friend were pretty quote unquote woke, and I say that in the sense of virtue signaling more than actually genuinely being understanding of the world. I really appreciated that. But I will challenge you, Sarah. I think there is one character who is wholly likable, and I'm happy to be pushed back. And that is the wonderful masseuse, Belinda Lindsay.
Yeah.
Natasha Rothwell, who her only moment of maybe weakness was her human exhaustion of being taken through the ringer. Like, I saw that character and I thought I would love that. She seems like a great person. I didn't feel she did anything in the show that would
totally
warrant a flaw.
You mean just basically that moment of exhaustion of being white people's sounding boards and sort of having to be the therapist all the time for rich white people.
She'd been stuffed over by or at least she'd been had her expectations built up. And I know that they're making a second season, which I think will be an anthology at another location around the world. But if they were to continue and have the White Lotus as the location, and each season was a new collection of characters to come to the place, I would love to see her as the continuing character.
That's
and
true.
The overall arc is that she ultimately owns the White Lotus, or she manages it in some way.
Well, she would be less pleasant she'd be less pleasant in a season 2, I think, if you were to write her in a really interesting sort of way, and keep her as a sort of a core cast member. Look, Jeremy, you're absolutely right. I do beg to differ a little bit, just to use our phrase du jour, on the Paula character. I think Paula is a fascinatingly nuanced character. I think that's true. The fact that she's brought along on the holiday, she's a smart person going to a Ponzi university with Sydney. Now, hang on, Sydney's the actress's name.
Olivia.
The fact that they're so bitchy and they're so snarky and everything, and I do understand how it is that sometimes you just need to fit in. This is not speaking from experience, guys, clearly, but sometimes one might feel one needs to fit in with their friend, and therefore they'll go along with all that nastiness. But in a way, she's brilliantly complex because she wants to be or experience a part of this world, but it also throws into relief the world that she comes from, because I'm sure at least a couple of times somebody makes a snarky sort of, well, you couldn't afford to be here if you hadn't come with the family kind of comment. Then, of course,
I don't know. Were there any of those comments? My feeling was always that she was just as, like, maybe not as rich as the Mossbachers, but really well off as well. Like, that's how she presents herself.
I thought Olivia said something in their snarky moments towards the end when they fell out before they got back together, the friends, the girlfriends, something like, my family brought you on this holiday and you wouldn't have been able to be here otherwise. I'm sure she
Okay.
says something like that. But I mean, but it's written all over. But it's written all over Paula's face as well. That slight insecurity, which actually I think, if anything, makes her more likable and more relatable for the audience, because most of us probably couldn't afford to go into such a swanky resort either. But if we had friends who could take us, that'd be kind of amazing, you know, and we might feel like we wanted to go over. I don't know. We could do a whole episode on Paula. I do not think that she threw that boy away, though, Jeremy. I will just say, I feel as though she did nothing to step in and say, I'm really sorry, I'm partly to blame here, it was my idea.
She did nothing to step in when the mother and father left the boat.
But what could she have done? She would have implicated herself. So I'm not suggesting that was a good person thing to do, but I didn't think it was callous. I thought it was selfish.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think she professed the way that she's talking with Kai is professing to be, you know, I'm not like this family. I'm not like them. I'm different. I understand. I want to help you and your family.
Yeah.
And then when push came to shove, she
still looks after herself.
I mean, it's a similar arc to the newlywed wife. What's the actor's name?
Rachel.
The character's Rachel.
Alexandra Daddario.
Alexandra Daddario, and I think her arc is brilliant, and that she's having this crisis, and then I love that at the end she comes back to him, because ultimately,
so good, so good.
That for me was like, because I was thinking the whole time she was going through this downward spiral. I was thinking, well, what motivated you to marry him in the first place? Like, for me to believe this downward spiral is a real revelation, then it kind of contradicts how you got yourself into this scenario, and so I really appreciated that it ended there.
The whole resolution with Belinda kind of turning her down, and how that just cascades into her decision to stay with Shane is like chef's kiss. I thought the show was going to make her leave. Like I don't know. Did you guys ever think she was the one in the box, or was that too obvious, kind of a misdirection?
I went everyone was in the box at some stage, to be honest.
I thought Jennifer Coolidge. I thought Jennifer Coolidge was going to
be in the box.
You thought Greg was going to be in the box?
Yeah. Yes.
The moment he started coughing, it was like, oh, is this a red herring this whole time?
So Greg being Jennifer Coolidge's boyfriend,
her beau.
who just wants to have some fun. Let's just have some fun. Sure, we can go to Aspen. Let's just have some fun. And she's like so desperate for connection.
Let's just talk. Can we talk about Jennifer Coolidge? Because everybody's raving about her performance, and as far as I'm concerned, I think it's all deserved. I mean, I love her anyway, but my gosh, every moment with her was fun. I mean, even down to that scene with her and Belinda, and she starts repeating Belinda's phrases, and she says something like, you don't need to do this. She's like, but I want to. And I'm like, I'm sure that was improvised. I'm sure that was Jennifer Coolidge just being her brilliant self.
Such a beautiful, nuanced, sad character as well.
And she feels so real, like compared to the other characters who are on a spectrum of being realish to being really, really cartoonish when it comes to people like Shane. There's some scenes with Jennifer Coolidge. There's one scene where I think they're on a boat or something, and they're talking about Belinda, and she's like, oh, you know, well, you have to book her in time because I have her booked. Yes. She's leaning over, and she says, like, you have a beautiful family. It's like, oh my gosh, I've met people like her in real life, and it feels so real.
Yeah. Do you know that Mike White wrote that role specifically for her? He had wanted, he has known her, been friends with her for a while, and I believe I read a profile, and I think I sent it to you, Jeremy, but not you, William, yet, because you hadn't finished watching the show. But if I recall correctly, Mike White, I think like a lot of us, felt that Jennifer Coolidge is so amazing and so wonderful and has been around for a long time and hasn't ever really had the role to get her teeth into that she deserves and that she could totally handle. And so he specifically created that character around her. Now, the discomfort for me is when you read the profile, you realize that there are huge similarities between real Jennifer Coolidge and her character, the ashes spreading daughter of the deceased mum. And
Tanya
me,
is a Tanya McQuad.
That's right, Tanya. And for me, there's a sadness there for real life Jennifer Coolidge, but my goodness, what a role! And yes, it'll secure her much meatier, more dramatic roles, won't it? She'll no longer just be the mom from American Pie or whatever, anymore.
It's been quite cool seeing the Christopher Guest alum, particularly Jane Lynch, Catherine O'Hara, and Jennifer Coolidge. In more recent years, getting some big roles. Like, it's been a while now, but I do think Jane Lynch's turn in Glee really,
it catapulted her.
It really took her to another level. And the same thing with Catherine O'Hara. Even more so, I would say, in Schitt's Creek, and how she garnered a lot of attention, both commercially and critically, and through the award ceremonies. And then I think Jennifer Coolidge has done it here. It's really satisfying to see some of these, I guess, character actors and comedians who have had long and strong careers, but usually on the sidelines, getting some of the kudos that they deserve.
Absolutely. Let's talk about other nuanced performances. And I will just say, listeners, William is a little bit Team Shane.
Team Shane!
Because he said, well, if you'd given him the room that he had ordered or that he had reserved, then none of this would have happened. And I'd love to hear what we all feel about that. Because there's an element of truth in that. Armand was deceitful and, in the wrong. And yet some of us believe that Shane was a dick. So, yeah, let's talk this through.
Speaking of Shane and Armand, can I just take a moment to be a little bit exaggerated?
Please. Always.
Okay. So this is maybe not the extent of the real extent of my feelings, but you guys remember the movie The Martian with Matt Damon and a whole bunch of people who ended up in Marvel movies? So The Martian is what some people call competence porn. It's about a problem where a group of highly qualified professionals band together and they do their job to the best of their abilities and they solve the problem at hand. I feel like the character of Armand is the exact opposite of competence porn. And I just could not understand how this dude... Yes, I get his backstory. He's been sober for 5 years. He's had issues in the past. But as the manager of a very, very swanky, very expensive establishment, like, how could you do your job like that?
But William, he's so genuinely charming. Well, when I say genuinely, what I mean is inauthentically, superficially charming, though. Like, he is the epitome of the person who you want to make you feel as though all of your needs are being looked after. And when you watch him do his last dinner service, on the fateful evening before he meets his end, he's extraordinary.
I don't think he does anything particularly bad before spiraling into drug use and not being sober anymore. Apart from there seems to be a stuff up in the rooms, which that does happen. I mean, that happens all the time with bookings.
I don't know. It just seemed like his manner with the guests. Like, I remember that scene, I think, from episode 1, where he talks to what's the name? Mark, the
Steve Zahn character.
I keep wanting to say Timothy Zahn, sorry. and Mark is asking about the various options that the resort has for activities, water skiing, this and that. And he just turns every single one of them down. And I had a look, guys. I went to Four Seasons Hawaii, which is where the show was filmed. And I looked up the prices of their suites. And it is a lot of money, like a lot of money. And putting myself in the shoes of these people, yes, they are rich, but rich people care about money as much as anyone else, probably more. You are spending, upwards of 4, maybe 5, maybe 6, no, not 6, but 5 figures on these amazing, on paper holiday packages, and he's just turning everyone down, and he's making it doesn't feel like he's doing a good job across the board, just from watching the show.
So William, something though that you may not be aware of is that sometimes narratives need to have stumbling blocks in order for the drama to be propelled forward. So he can't go, oh, I'd like to go water skiing. He goes, sure, I'll book you in at 9 a.m. in
But
scene.
it
You know?
just comes off. He just comes off from the very beginning as someone who is not very good at what he
Yeah.
does, and I don't
Shifty.
know. I don't know whether that's the point of the narrative, because of course it then spirals out of control. But I never really had much sympathy for him as, you know, a viewer, even when you find out about the other stuff. And I think because of that, I also, and this is reading too much into this, but I truly, honestly feel that the show really wanted you to hate Shane. And maybe because of that, and maybe because I started off on this show is not going super well for me. I ended up super rooting for Shane, because he's this cartoon horn dog who, like, he's completely oblivious. He's a friggin' cartoon character who's caught out about his cartoonness by the end of the show, when his wife very, very acutely calls him just this baby man. And he's there to, you know, stuff his face full of bacon, to like show off his abs, to go swimming, to do more swimming. And I kind of love him for that. Like, I feel like the show really, for better and for worse, like really demonizes him and makes him out to be a villain. And I think he's super fun to watch because of that, and also a little bit of unfairness because of that.
Well, I mean, talking about Armand, I really loved the Armand character. I've been in hotel service before. It's horrible. It was one of the worst jobs I've ever done. The place that I worked at was fantastic, great staff, great, you know, but my gosh, having to be this angel in a white shirt and black tie to these entitled guests is one of the worst experiences of my life. I'm not going to lie. And so when I saw Armand dealing with the fact that there are things in the island that were out of action that he didn't have control over, and he was sharing that, I was quite impressed by that. I was like, oh, he's doing a great job. So I don't share that opinion with you, William. With Shane, my issue with Shane is not so much that he pushed hard for the room. It was the fact that his wife clearly was frustrated with him because he was diverting the attention of their honeymoon from just enjoying their time together with what they had, and was becoming obsessed. And I guess as someone who can be that person sometimes, that hit a nerve, being oblivious to the bigger reality of the people around you and just enjoying it, over the kind of position of that. So I think I saw myself in Shane in more ways than I would like to admit, which made him more of someone that I could dislike as a part of disliking part of myself. And I'd also say I think they're playing with an American hero archetype, right? Like he is the American hero. He's the buff, white, straight guy who usually is our heroes in days gone by. So
the rich guy with the pretty wife.
Yeah, they're playing with that. He's a James Bondish kind of character in here, and they're playing with that trope. I do have something to say about Armand, but maybe Sarah, did you want to? I sense you want to jump in.
I just wanted to say about Shane, you know, I think the problem for me is I don't like complainers, and I don't mean this to make me sound like I'm super pious and I'm just glad to be here, but I think that there is a part of me that isn't very good at saying, oh, actually, I booked the pineapple suite. Could you make it happen? But I also think there's a kind of part of me that would go, you know what, it isn't working out. I'm not going to let this cast a pal over my whole holiday, let alone my honeymoon, for crying out loud, because I don't want to look like, quite honestly, the dick that Shane, to me, looks like by complaining and making it such a big deal, because I don't think it's a very nice part of his character. And the only thing that mitigates anything about Shane for me is when he criticizes his wife's journalism, and you think, oh, that's pretty mean. You shouldn't really be so snarky about the way that she's a writer. He's not actually wrong, because when he says you're writing puff pieces for, you know, lo-fi kind of vaguely journalistic enterprises, there's a part of me that goes, well, he's kind of right there. So, why is she thinking that she wants to have this kind of really important life and, really important career? But other than that, I'm like, I just don't like people. I don't like people who are negative and complainy. And yet they have a right to be, because as you say, William, if you're spending 5 figures on a week's vacation and you're not getting what you paid for, there's an issue there. So
bouncing off what both of you are saying, Jeremy first and then Sarah. Jeremy, completely agreed. I also see a lot of myself in Shane. The complaining part, like I have been in that position where I've paid quite a bit for some sort of hotel thing, and the hotel's been completely off with what they were offering, and I just keep making these back and forth, up the escalator, down the escalator journeys to complain about stuff with the manager. So that rung really true for me in a kind of weird, twisted way. With what you were saying, Sarah, I agree with that as well. And the stuff with Shane criticizing Rachel's writing, that I think everything for me about the Rachel character is just, it's done really, really well, from her initial introduction to kind of the resolution of their relationship. I love how at the beginning you're like, oh, she needs to strike out on her own. He's holding her back and all this stuff. But then she has the kind of bump in the meeting with Nicole, and she gets shot down so hard, and you start to realize, like, oh, so I kind of understand what they're going with this character, which is like, she sees herself as mediocre, and she might not be wrong. And how do you cope with that? It was such an interesting direction to take with the character, and I thought everything resolved at the end so beautifully.
Yeah, that's true.
I love that, and I guess my reflection in that same thematic space, or the way that things have circled back, is around the Aman character. And I guess a lot of that focus of his journey is with the Shane tension. But there's another piece of the puzzle that I was sort of wondering, I felt like that was a loose thread, which was the Lani character in the first episode. Yes. She was such a massive part of it. But I was talking to my sister earlier this week, who she watched it after my recommendation and loved it. And her reading of it was fully on point, and I missed it, which is that her giving birth and being in labor during that first day is the reason why Armand ultimately has his downfall, because he realizes that he missed something major. And whilst there are drugs that appear to him and there's this other tension, it's that moment. And the fact that in episode 2 he feels terrible that he missed the fact that his staff member was in labor. And I
was pregnant, and then in like didn't even know she was pregnant. That's the thing. Yeah.
Right. And that as a character downfall is such a wonderful, complex, and kind of endearing quality. I mean, this moment of him realizing that he's let his staff down is what ultimately ends in him being stabbed. And I just, that is a piece. I mean, what does make Lani a kind of puppet character for Armand's story, but in terms of his arc, it really endeared me to that journey. It was very impressive.
I hadn't thought about that at all. Yeah. And I mean, I buy it a little bit. I think I would say, as a rejoinder, it was Lani's first day at work. So it's not as though he was invested in her or really should have known. But I mean, sure, maybe if I rewatch it and I see in episode 2, as you suggest, that he's actually more chastened by that negligence, then yeah, sure, that might indeed be, as you say, the catalyst for his eventual downfall.
I mean, that's part of the formula, isn't it? The fact that she is new, and so he was treating that relationship with perhaps less weight. But if you see his relationship with Belinda and how close they are, he clearly cares about his staff, maybe some of them more than he should, and some of the young men that are around the place. But yeah, I was quite impressed by that, and I hadn't thought of that until my sister said that. Because otherwise, why is Lani there?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So guys, what do you think about the Moss Barker family? Because they do play a pretty big part in everyone's stories as well. And there's a lot going on with each member.
I think Nicole is unlikable, and yet strangely I did like her, but I didn't really like who she was. I thought but I think she was brilliantly drawn, because I think there are there are women like that. I think her fussing about trying to get the right background for her Chinese Skype call, I thought, oh yeah, that's when I say relatable, I don't mean I've ever headed a corporation and I've needed to do that from my Hawaiian vacation, but I mean, okay. But the $75,000 bracelets to make up for the infidelity, and I mean, again, don't want to sound like I'm like such a good guy, but I was just like, I actually said to my husband, honey, if this ever happens to us, don't bother with the $75,000 bracelets, because that would not compel me. I mean, I'm not that girl. So
it's such a specific amount.
Oh, but I mean, it's also a grotesquely huge amount, and in a way, it's supposed to apparently salve a relationship, and they only actually restore that marriage because he gets a wonderful opportunity at the expense of Kai, the Hawaiian staff, to save his wife's life. I mean, that's amazing, but but I don't know. It was so funny the way. Is his name Greg, the son? Is that right? No, sorry.
No, Quinn. Quinn is the son.
Quinn. It's so funny how they spend half the series going, Quinn, put your devices away, come and look at nature and be more present. And then he does, and they're all like, you need to have a phone with you, and you need to stay inside, and you need to.
That was cool.
Can we talk about Switchgate? Because I feel like we need to for William's sake.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So to keep people in the know, when I was watching the show, I was really concerned about Quinn's devices. So on him, he has a phone. Sometimes he uses his tablet, and he has a Nintendo Switch Lite, the black one, which I also own. And it just got more and more and more frustrating and anxiety-inducing every time he would bring his devices to the swimming pool.
Was it Chekhov's gun for you?
Oh
like,
my gosh.
When is this going to go wrong?
When the Chekhov switch did go off, I was so both elated and horrified. It was quite the moment. I sent you guys a video message of me like screaming at the screen going, I knew it! Because, guys, I've had those experiences. I've had multiple digital cameras, a brand new digital camera I take to the beach in LA. Oh, shoot, Santa's in the lens. Well, there goes $500. Let's go kayaking with my phone. Oh my gosh, the screen's glitched out. Guess I shouldn't have gone kayaking with my phone. Like, just seeing these very expensive devices to some very, very hazardous locations for expensive devices, really got my teeth on the edge. It was excruciating.
William. As you say this, William, it makes me remember when I went to Bali and I took my really expensive iPhone and I filmed underwater, and I got all these beautiful shots of the coral reef and the fishes, and at the half an hour mark, which is what the Apple box tells you, you should only have your phone under a couple of meters of water for up to half an hour. I was about to swim back and put my phone back with my things, and my auntie said, let's swim out deeper. And so we did, and that was when my phone started glitching. And I destroyed my phone in that afternoon. And so it meant that for the rest of my week in Bali, I didn't have my phone. And as much as I wasn't able to take any photos, it was quite freeing. Like I can see how he would join a waka and sail off into the sunset.
I think it's lovely that Mother Nature had to take his devices away for that to be enabled. It's beautiful. William, I just have to say, love, I think I spoke of you earlier this podcast and sort of implied that you were quite far up the right thinking end of the spectrum, and now I'm afraid not. I mean, how many lessons are you not learning by this happening time and time again?
All right, team. Let's do final thoughts. So, William, I'll throw it to you. What are your final thoughts about the White Lotus?
Yeah. Okay. So just to kind of echo what I said before, I did enjoy watching it. Like, obviously, I've been having a lot of fun talking about it. I think the characters are all pretty well realized. Going back to Paula for just a teeny bit, I loved how frustrating she was. Like, I think out of everyone in the cast, or maybe because Shane kills the guy, but she completely destroys this poor dude's life, and just like, oh, well, I'll feel bad about it, but what can you do? And it's grotesque. Like, so yeah, the characters are really, really compelling. The scene where Belinda turns down Rachel, like, I fist pump. Yes, this moment of victory for her. But yeah, overall, I just felt like the show I would have enjoyed it more if I felt like it wasn't so just ambitious, so completely obvious with how it was going about its themes and its music and its narrative overall.
Oh, brilliant. Well, my final thoughts on this show are that I had a great time. I really enjoyed the general energy of it, and so every episode, every hour or however long each episode was a little gift for me, particularly set in a beautiful location at a time where I can only really go for walks with a mask on up to the local dairy and back. And so yeah, I found the show for me was exactly what I needed at this stage of the lockdown. I'm a huge fan of all of the actors in this piece, and I'm really keen to see where they take this, whether it's an anthological or whether it's another take on the White Lotus as a location. I'm really keen to see what Mike White and his team do for the second season, which I assume will be coming out in the next year or so. But that's me. Sarah.
As I've said, I absolutely loved it. I can't wait to rewatch it. I will give it a little while longer because it's only been a few weeks. And I do tend to enjoy things. I enjoy a good rewatch when I've sufficiently forgotten what it was like the first time. I absolutely respect what you say, William, about its being possibly quite on the nose in terms of its messaging. But I think my argument would be there are a lot of people, particularly in the United States of America, but actually everywhere, who would not give a second thought to what's really going on behind the scenes in a luxury resort or cruise ship or whatever. And I've certainly been that way myself. I pride myself in always being gracious to wait staff and saying pleases and thank yous and smiling and acknowledging, which is more than a lot of people do. But I think it's absolutely made me go, well, heck, I'm not sure whether I'm going to be able to, in good conscience, take a vacation like that again, which is a whole other podcast, because then where do I go on holidays? But which is not to say I do all resorts, guys. I don't mean that, but do you know what I mean? It certainly it limits things. I think that the political side of the messaging, I think the fact that Olivia actually, for being probably one of the most horrible people in the whole piece, with her nasty, snarky supposed best friendness and horrible to her brother and awful to Kai and all that stuff, I still think Olivia probably says, you might say woke, Jeremy, the most woke things, but also really incisive points that speak to being white and privileged in the 21st century. And I think that there is a strange discomfort in going to places that, as I said before, have been colonized by white people, where now it's a case of show us your local dances. Let's go look at a local village. Show us your customs in a really kind of, I don't know, there's a discomfort for me around all that sort of thing. I thought it was fascinating and I think brilliantly written, wonderful dialogue, great characterization. Still love the theme tune. Hadn't noticed it throughout the whole thing, William, I must say, but absolutely love the theme tune and the sort of the shiver up the spine as you go into the new episode. So yeah, I think The White Lotus is definitely one of the cleverest pieces of television that we've had in a long while.
Excellent. Thank you for listening to another episode of Cinema in Context. If you enjoyed our podcast, then please share it with your film-loving friends. You can listen to Cinema in Context through SoundCloud, Spotify, Stitcher, Radio Public, Amazon Music, and Apple Podcasts. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram, which are also great places to let us know what you think of this episode or give us suggestions for future films to discuss and compare. Look out for our next episode in a month's time, and until then,
No mai.